Check this out, Beastin right here, bringing you another Commander deck tech. Today we're looking at Megatron Tyrant. We're in the Mardu colors, and we're going to be doing a whole bunch of fun, crazy things with artifact creatures. Megatron Tyrant himself is a 7/5 artifact creature robot that also has a vehicle side. Your opponents can't cast spells during combat, which is going to be our main focus on dealing damage to all of our opponents. At the beginning of our post-combat main phase, we get to convert Megatron, and if we do, we get to add 1 colorless mana for each life your opponents lost that turn. So we're going to be generating a lot of colorless mana that we're going to use for various artifacts, artifact creatures. Megatron will transform into his vehicle side, which he'll be a 4/5, and if it's your turn, he'll be a creature. And whenever Megatron attacks, we can sacrifice another artifact, and if we did, we get to deal damage to a target creature equal to the sacrifice artifact's mana value. And if there's any excess damage, that damage will be dealt to that creature's controller. And then you get to convert Megatron again. So Megatron will constantly be switching between his vehicle side and his creature side, which is very fun. So let's get right into it. We are running 1 Planeswalker, and it's none other than Tyrant Scrap Savant. If you're in a very heavy artifact build, Tyrant Scrap Savant is the guy you want on your side. With his +2 ability, we get to discard up to 2 cards and then draw that many. And his -2, which we're really going to focus on, is we get to sacrifice a artifact and then return any artifact from our graveyard back to the battlefield. This is going to be very beneficial because we can use like a treasure token or a solemn simulacrum to return a very powerful artifact or artifact creature back to the battlefield. And if we get to his -10, that's going to be very powerful overall, because whenever a artifact is put into our graveyard from the battlefield, we get to return that artifact back to play. Okay, let's get into the creatures. First up is all the artifact creatures. So we have our Burnished Heart. That way we can go get basic lands on the battlefield. Similar to that, we have Pilgrim's Eye. This is also a good blocker in case your opponents have flyers. And of course, we have Sad Robot or Solemn Simulacrum. It's going to enter, and you're going to go search for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tap, and when Solemn is put into a graveyard, we get to draw a card. And because artifacts will be going to our graveyard quite often, why not start getting them back with Scrap Trawler? This is fun. Whenever Scrap Trawler or another artifact is put into our graveyard, we get to return a artifact with lesser mana value back to our hand. Now we have Alibu, Ancient Witness. This is going to give all our artifact creatures haste, and whenever one or more artifact creatures attack, Alibu will deal X damage to any target, and we get to scry X, where X is the number of tapped artifacts we control. Now we have Iron Soul Enforcer. Whenever Iron Soul Enforcer or a commander attacks alone, we get to return any artifact back from our graveyard to the battlefield. We have the iconic Wormcoil Engine. This is a 6/6 with Death Touch and Lifelink, and if Wormcoil would be put into a graveyard, we get 2 3/3 worm tokens. One's going to have lifelink, one's going to have death touch. Now we have Noxious Gearhulk. When this enters, we get to destroy target creature and then gain life equal to that creature's toughness. It's also a 5/4 with menace, so it's already hard to block. Now we have Scuttling Doom Engine. Scuttling Doom Engine can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less, and if it would be put into a graveyard, we get to deal 6 damage to target opponent. Now we have Ruin Grinder. This is a 7/4 with menace, and when it's put into a graveyard, each player gets to discard their hand and draw 7. He's kind of like a Wheel of Fortune, but he also has Mountain Cycling. Okay, now we have Blitzwing, Cruel Tormentor. This is another transformer that we're going to use to make sure that our opponent loses as much life as possible, because every single end step, target opponent will lose life equal to the life they lost that turn. But if no life was lost, we get to transform Blitzwing. Blitzwing will become Blitzwing Adaptive Assailant. This is a 3/5 with living metal as well. As long as it's our turn, the vehicle will be a creature as well. But at the beginning of combat, we get to choose either flying or indestructible at random, and Blitzwing will gain that ability. And then whenever Blitzwing deals combat damage to a player, we get to convert it back. Now we have Duplicate. This one is very good because just when it enters, you get to exile a creature your opponent controls, and the Duplicate will become an exact copy of the exiled creature. Now we have Combustible Gearhulk. I really like Combustible Gearhulk because it doesn't give your opponent very good options. Either they're going to take a lot of damage, or they're going to allow you to draw 3 cards. It also will put more cards into your graveyard as well. That way you can get those back later on as well. Now we have good old Battle Ball, or Mer Battlesphere. When Mer Battlesphere enters the battlefield, you're going to create 4 1/1 colorless Mer tokens, and whenever Mer Battlesphere attacks, you can tap any number of untapped Mers to give Mer Battlesphere +X+O, and then deal X damage to that player or planeswalker. Now we have good old Meteor Golem. When it enters, you get to destroy a non-land permanent a opponent controls. Now we have Angel of Ruins. When this enters, you get to exile 2 target artifacts or enchantments. It also has Plane Cycling, in case you really need a Plains card. Now we have Sandstone Oracle. This is a 4/4 with flying. It'll enter the battlefield, then you get to choose a opponent, and if that opponent has more cards in their hand, you get to draw cards equal to the difference. This will be really beneficial later on. Now we have Cityscape Leveler. I love this card. It's an 8/8 with trample. When you cast it or Cityscape Leveler attacks, you get to destroy a non-land permanent, and its controller will create a tap Power Stone. Now we have Bosch Iron Golem. This is a 6/7 with trample, and his activated ability will allow you to sacrifice any artifact and deal damage to any target equal to the sacrifice artifact's mana value. And of course, we have Triplicate Titan. This is similar to Wormcoil Engine, except it has flying, vigilance, and trample. And when Triplicate Titan is put into a graveyard, we get a 3/3 Golem of each of those abilities. Now we have Metalwork Colossus. This is just a very, very large artifact creature, and its mana value can be reduced, where X is the number of non-creature artifacts you control. and you can continually sacrifice 2 artifacts to return Metalwork Colossus from your graveyard back to your hand. Now we have some creatures that are going to synergize with all these artifact creatures. So we have Goblin Welder. Goblin Welder is probably the best way to get out a very large artifact creature very quickly, because all you have to do is have some kind of junk artifact on the battlefield and a very large artifact creature in your graveyard, and you just switch places. Now we have Oswald Fiddlebender. This is basically Birthing Pod for artifacts. Now we have Osgir, the Reconstructor. This is a 4/4 with Vigilance, and its activated ability, we get to sacrifice a artifact, and then target creature will get +2/+0. Or we can pay X, activate it, exile a artifact card with mana value X from our graveyard, and then create 2 tokens that are exact copies of the exile card. Now we have Neheb, the Eternal. This is a 4/6 with Afflict. So whenever Neheb becomes blocked, that player is going to lose 3 life. But we're not too concerned with that. We're basically at the beginning of our post-combat main phase, we get to add 1 red mana for each 1 life our opponents lost that turn. We can add a lot of red mana with this guy. And of course, we have Heartless Hittigatoo. This is going to force our opponent's life total to be very low. That way we can just kind of one-shot them. Okay, let's get into the artifacts themselves. So we have Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Rakdos Signet, Boros Signet, and Orzhov Signet. We do have a lot of mana rocks, but we kind of need them. We also have Mind Stone. If we really need to, we can sacrifice Mind Stone and draw a card. We have Commander Sphere. We can sacrifice this to draw a card. Now we have Hedron Archive. This will add 2 colorless mana, but we can sacrifice it and draw 2 cards. Now we have some protection. We have our Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots. This will give the equipped creature hexproof and haste. Now we have Ichor Wellspring. This is going to enter to draw us a card, but if it's put into a graveyard, we get to draw a card as well. Now we have Thousand Year Elixir. This will allow us to activate abilities of our creatures the moment we cast them. We can also pay 1 and untap a creature that has a activated ability. Now we have Nile Spellbound. This will allow us to deal with our opponent's graveyards if we really needed to. Now we have Battle Mage's Bracers. This is going to give the equipped creature haste, and whenever an ability of a creature is activated, if it isn't a mana ability, we can pay 1 colorless and copy that ability. Now we have Whip of Erebos. This is going to give all our creatures lifelink, and we can return any creature from our graveyard back to the battlefield. Unfortunately, if that creature would leave the battlefield, it'll get exiled. So you do have to be a little careful with Whip of Erebos. Now we have good old Spine of Isha. When this enters, we get to destroy any permanent, and if Spine would be put into a graveyard, it'll come right back to our hand. This is going to be a very good target to sacrifice with Duretti to get other things back to the battlefield. Okay, let's get into the enchantments. We have Phyrexian Arena. That way we can stay ahead of our opponents in card advantage. Now we have Pia's Revolution. Whenever a non-token artifact is put into our graveyard, we get to return that card back to our hand unless our opponent wants to take 3 damage. Now we have Pestilence. This is going to deal with all of our opponent's creatures because we're just going to dump a bunch of black mana into Pestilence and kill off all our opponent's creatures and not really care too much about ours. Now we have Pyrohemia. This is basically the red Pestilence. Okay, let's get into the instant. We have some card selection with Thrill of Possibility. As an additional cost, we have to discard a card, but we get to draw 2 cards. Similar to that, we have Big Score, but we get to draw 2 cards and create 2 treasure tokens. Now we got some removal. So we have Dispatch. This is actually better than Path to Exile or Swords to Plowshares because we're going to have plenty of artifacts for Metalcraft. We're just going to exile the creature. And to punish our opponents even more, if they have a lot of non-basic lands, we have Price of Progress. It'll deal 2 damage to each player for each non-basic land they control. Now we have Crackling Doom. This will deal 2 damage to each opponent, and then each opponent has to sacrifice a creature with the greatest power they control. Now we have Comet Storm. When we have a lot of mana, we're just going to dump as much mana into Comet Storm and deal that much damage. Okay, let's get into the sorceries. We have even more card selection with Faithless Looting. That way we can ensure that we're putting the big things in our graveyard when we need them to, while maintaining card advantage. Now we have Painful Truce. We get to draw X cards and we lose X life, where X is the number of colors. So for 3 mana, we can ultimately draw 3 cards. That's pretty good. Now we have Flame Rift, when you just need to deal 4 damage to each player. Now we have Scrap Mastery. This is kind of like Living Death, but just for artifacts. So if we have a whole bunch of artifacts in our graveyard, then we cast Scrap Mastery, our opponents are going to lose all the artifacts in play, and chances are they're not going to have that many artifacts compared to us in their graveyard. So we get to return a whole bunch of artifact creatures back to play in one shot. Now we have some mass removal with Cleansing Nova. We can either destroy all creatures or destroy all artifacts and enchantments. Similar to that, we have Merciless Eviction. Sometimes you don't want to destroy all the creatures, you just want to exile them. Now we have Chandra's Ignition. If we have a very large creature, we're going to use Chandra's Ignition to have that creature deal damage to each opponent equal to its power. Okay, now we have Jaya's Immolating Inferno. So if we have a bunch of mana lying around, we can just target 3 things and deal X damage to those targets. Now we have Ruinous Ultimatum, when you just need to blow up all non-land permanents your opponents control. Now we have Wake the Past. This is going to allow us to return every single artifact from our graveyard back to the battlefield, and they'll gain haste. That way, we can kind of like artifact crater hoof our opponents, and that's really fun. Okay, let's get into the land base. It's a very simple land base. So we have our command tower, Nomad Outpost, Sacred Foundry, Blood Crypt, Godless Shrine, Isolated Chapel as our check land, Dragon Skull Summit, Clifftop Retreat. Now we have a bunch of artifact lands. So we have Dross Forge Bridge, Goldmire Bridge, and Rustvale Bridge. We also have the original artifact lands with Ancient Den, Great Furnace, and Vault of Whispers. We also have Dark Steel Citadel. This is a indestructible artifact land, and if we need to deal with our opponent's graveyard, we have Bajuka Bog as some utility lands. We also have Rogue's Passage, in case one of these very large artifact creatures needs to deal combat damage. Just make it unblockable. And we have Buried Ruin. That way we can return any artifact back to our hand. Now we got some basic fetch lands. So we have Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse. We have 4 swamps, 4 plains, and 8 mountains. And that was the Commander deck tech for Megatron Tyrant. I really hope you guys enjoyed this deck tech. This deck is really fun to play against and play with. But if you guys have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments below. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.